Stick around and we'll take a look at a simple, fun, and downright addictive riff. What's up, everybody out there in YouTube land? I hope you're all doing great. This should be a really fun lesson. It's one of my favorite things to do, is look at riffs that remind me why I picked up the guitar in the first place. I don't know about you, but I picked it up to have fun. So we're going to be taking a look at this riff today. I know I called this series Quick Licks, and I think this is the second one only in the series. And they've both kind of been more of riffs than licks, but I don't think anybody really cares about that as much as I do. So I digress. So today's riff that we're going to be looking at is based on the song True Lies from Kenny Wayne Shepherd's album Trouble Is. Now, if you're around my age, Kenny Wayne Shepherd was huge when I was in my formative years. Kind of the ubiquitous song was Blue on Black. That song was absolutely everywhere. I believe that album, Trouble Is, came out in the early 90s sometime. Anyways, this is kind of loosely based on the song True Lies. Like I said, we're going to take a look at this riff. I'm going to show it to you. It's a pretty easy breakdown. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips right afterwards on how you can kind of take off from here if this isn't really challenging enough, not really blowing up your skirt, you know, not really enough in it for you. Then I'll kind of explain to you some ways that you can kind of take it in your own direction to get more out of it. So stick around after I break it down for those couple of tips. So like I said, this is going to be a pretty light, fun lesson to remind us why we picked up the guitar in the first place. You heard the example of the riff on the opening. That's basically exactly how I'm going to break it down to you. So with that said, we're keeping it pretty light today, but before we jump right into it, two things to get out of the way, kind of housekeeping for the channel. The first one, if you follow this channel at all, yes, this is the Squier Affinity Telecaster that I wasn't entirely satisfied with in my last video where I reviewed it. So there will be a video very soon coming up on kind of, you know, what it takes to take an okay guitar and make it a great one. And the other thing I want to say is if you don't want to miss content like that or lessons like this, guitar chats, anything like that, if guitar is a passion of yours like it is of mine, please, the best support you can give me is just subscribing, hitting that bell, and YouTube will let you know when my next videos come out, when I go live. Feel free to give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, let me know what I'm doing right, what you'd like to see, what I'm doing wrong, whatever. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is going to be pretty much a simple blues progression, although we're not going to go for our typical kind of 1-4-5 kind of deal. The majority of the riff will be spent kind of with some licks that are firmly on first the E or the 1 chord, then the A or the 4 chord, and then we go from there with a couple of little chordal figures before we come back around to the beginning. It's all pretty simple, pretty fun. Let's take a closer look. All right, so the first part of this riff or phrase, whatever you want to call it, that we're going to look at is simply kind of this kind of riff figure on the 1 chord or the E. So slowly it's going to look something like this. Now, anybody out there who's maybe an intermediate player, a little further along, you can kind of catch on to what I'm doing there. You might want to skip ahead to after the breakdown for the tips of how you can take this a bit further. So, this is our first part. What I just showed you is our first part, and it's basically, like I said, just a little bit of riffing over the 1 chord, or in this case, the E. So we're going to start here with our D string open, and we're going to hammer on. Okay, hammer on twice, and then once open. Okay, now we're going to go up to our next string, our A string. 2nd fret, 1st fret, open, okay, so far we have also a little bit of do as I say, not as I do. Once you get this under your fingers a little, use a metronome to get a handle on the groove. I can't say it enough. I don't know what people's aversions to metronomes are. Your playing will progress much faster if you use a metronome to practice. All right. So far we have this. Now we go to our 3rd fret on our 6th string. Now open on our A string and hammer on to the 2nd fret. So far we have this. Okay, that's actually going to be a hammer on and a pull off, okay? So and we're going to go right back to our 6th string on the 3rd fret. Right here, we're going to give this note a little tug. Okay, so far we have. And then just the open 6th string. And then we cycle that for our 4 bars. Okay, now obviously for you intermediate players out there, you're going to pick this up pretty quick because our next figure is going to be the same thing but 1 string set down to apply to our 4 chord or our A. Okay, so before we move on to the A, one more time in review. Okay, now after our 4th bar of the E figure, instead of going back to this open E at the end to start the cycle over again, we go to our A, because we're going to apply the same riff to our A chord or our 4 chord now. So the last bar of the E going into the first bar of the A would look like this. So I'll run through this for all you kind of beginners, people who aren't quite as far along out there. I'll run through this figure over the A chord, but just keep in mind that when we have our 1 anywhere on the 6th string, no matter where it is, directly underneath we have our 4. Just something to keep in mind. You can move a lot of the same riffs and figures 1 string set down if you're moving from a 1 to a 4, and that's exactly the kind of simple and effective songwriting that they're using here. So to apply this to the 4 chord, or the A chord in this case, we're going to start with our 2 hammer-ons, but in this case it's going to be on the G string because we're 1 string set down, or everything's going to be 1 string down, right? So on our G string we have our 2 hammer-ons and our open string. Right? Now we have our 2nd fret and our 1st fret on the D string. Now open D string. To our 3rd fret of our A string. Hammer on and pull off on our 2nd fret of our D string, just like we did on our A string, right? Back to our 3rd fret of our A string. So far. And then just the open A. So we want to do kind of that same idea as we did on the E figure over the A, but we're going to do it for 2 bars instead of for 4 bars. I want to remind you right now, if I'm going what seems like a little fast for you, not to sound crude or brash or however you say it, rude, whatever, YouTube does have not only slow down features, but of course you have the ability to rewind and play this as many times as you need to. But like I said, you can, in the YouTube settings, slow this down if you're having that much trouble, and the YouTube slow down function actually keeps the pitch intact. Just a little kind of service announcement for you guys who are just picking up the instrument. Alright, so we're going to run through where we're at so far. We have 4 bars of the E figure, 2 bars of the A figure, okay? There's our 2 bars, right? So now we hit the open E. We're going to do 2 more bars of the E figure, okay? Now our little chordal figure. We're going to go to our G chord. I like to use my thumb, especially with styles of playing like this, where not only is it easier because of the way I play, but probably because the songwriter actually plays like this. So, anyways, however you want to play it, we have a G chord. We want to strike our G note twice. and then the chord. We're going to do a little strumming figure. Now, I want to say another thing that people get hung up on. Nothing needs to be played perfectly exactly. First of all, this isn't exactly like the recording that I'm basing it on. Second of all, you don't have to play this exactly like me if you're doing the lesson. And if it doesn't come out sounding exactly like me, A, don't get down on yourself, and B, good. Because if we all sounded alike, that would be boring. Alright, so our chordal figure is going to look something like this. I'm just grabbing my G triad. For anybody who doesn't know where your kind of central G triad is here, this is a common kind of Hendrix SRV kind of chord, and Kenny Wayne Shephard very much was inspired and based his playing and music on not only SRV but Hendrix. So this is how we're going to play the chord because that voice fits it to me. So we have our thumb wrapped around and it's playing our G note on the 6th string at the 3rd fret. The only other 3 notes we're playing are the 5th fret of the D string, the 4th fret of the G string, and the 3rd fret of the B string. This is a G major triad. So basically this is just a G chord in kind of a Hendrix style, if you're not familiar. So we're going to use the same kind of chord shape for our A also. Now A is a whole step up, or 2 frets up. All we have to do is slide it up our 2 frets, right? So our A figure is going to sound just like our G figure. So our G figure and our A figure. And then we go right back into the cycle of the start of our riff. Okay, so I'm going to play 2 complete cycles so that you can hear how it feeds back into itself, essentially. Okay, super fun, super catchy, super addictive, and super easy to build off of, which is the last thing we're going to talk about quick before we go. So, most people who find lessons like this are beginners, naturally, because beginners are going to be more in search of lessons. If you're an intermediate and you found this lesson, and like I said, you could skip ahead to after the breakdown. I'd give a couple of ways we can use something like this to start as a taking off point. Here we are. So the first one is a pretty simple one, and it's one I didn't think of for a long time for whatever reason. And it's when you find catchy riffs or hooks or things like that, things that really speak to you, inspire you, things that you really like, turn them into a loop. Use it as a loop and play over it. Guitar as an instrument is meant to be expressive, and most of us, myself included, want to play lead guitar. So putting on a chord progression that speaks to us and using our ear and whatever harmonic knowledge we have to build off of it and play over it is essential. That's the whole goal, right? Eventually, when this whole pestilence ends, we want to be able to come together with other people again to make music. this whole music making thing is not about sitting in your bedroom alone playing over jam tracks. Although that's a lot of fun and can be the only thing you do, the magic happens when you and other people are playing instruments in the same room, feeding off of each other, building off of each other, bouncing energy off of each other. If you've never experienced it, work out your riffs, get out to a blues jam. I'm getting way off track. Next tip. Okay, the next tip is just to not play it straight like I did, right? Use it just as a taking off point instead of a steadfast riff that you need to play rigidly, right? So if I was sitting around kind of playing, practicing, and I wanted to kind of do that with this particular riff, it would probably start out something like this. Not going in the best direction, but so you can use it just as a simple jumping off point to either kind of stick to and veer off a little bit, or just use as a kind of harmonic or kind of chord guide and jump off from there. I think that's about it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Keep on rocking.